Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Thank you for joining this GP Strategies webinar, where we'll explore best practices and innovative insights to help you and your organization improve performance.
So everybody, hello and welcome to today's presentation, Utilize Technology to Reduce Skill Gaps and Create Business Opportunities. My name is Kim Heyer. I'm with GP Strategies, and I'm going to be hosting today's webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us. And before we get started with today, I just want to go over a few housekeeping tools and items. Obviously, everyone's lines have been muted. And again, we are going to be recording today's presentation, and we'll be sending out a link to it within 24 to 48 hours after today's presentation. Also, if you're having any technical issues, please feel free to send a chat directly to me, and I will do my best to help you with any of the issues that you are having. So before we begin, I want to take a minute just to encourage everybody to make this as interactive as possible. We are going to be having some polling, and as well as if you would like to comment on anything the presenters are presenting today, use the chat feature to encourage as much conversation for the presentation today as possible. Also, if you have any questions related directly to the presenters, use the Q&A option. We're going to try and answer them as we go through the presentation with the time that we have. And if we have any time left and we don't get to the questions, we will get to them at the end of today's presentation. So again, thank you everyone for joining today, and I'm excited to introduce you to our presenters. First, we have John Pasqualek. He's a vice president here at GP Strategies, and he is active in the HR technology consulting business for over 20 years. He and his organization specialize in supporting clients' HR transformations, from implementation of new technologies to redesigning business processes across all industries to improve business performance. And we also have Mike Downey. He's a business development executive with GP Strategies. He too has over 20 years of experience in the human resources and payroll technologies industry. He's worked in all sectors of the human capital management industry, including sales, consulting, partner relations, and product management with organizations such as ADP, Alight, and Oracle. Mike is also a frequent speaker and contributor on HR technologies and business transformation for multiple organizations. Gentlemen, we have a great session planned today. And with that, I am going to hand it over to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Kim. All right, well, welcome everybody. As Kim said, I'm John Pasqualek. I am the VP of HR Capital Technologies at GP Strategies, and I've been in this business for quite a while and looking forward to being able to share mine and Mike's experiences with you. So today, pretty simple. We're going to talk about a lot of business process, a lot of technology, talk about why that is really important to you now, especially with some events that have happened over the transformation over the last several years, particularly in the last two. Understand the historical technology state to where it is now, and then talk about how you can optimize that HRIS landscape moving forward to be able to really meet your business strategy objectives.
You know, just to set the stage a little bit, I think everybody on the call, you all can agree that there's been an employment shift for organizations around the world. You know, we've gone through a global pandemic. We've shifted. The global pandemic really accelerated what was already happening in terms of, you know, the utilization of remote workforce and the switch to, you know, hybrid working and things of that nature. And also, you know, the changing needs of our workforce and expectations of our workforce, and how we need to keep people engaged, how we need to develop people, how we need to make all of our systems work together. So what we're going to talk about today is, you know, background on that, and then how do we separate the successful organizations in that regard from the rest. And so, John, if you go to the next slide. John, you have a lot of, good observations on this. Why don't you share them?
Yeah, so as Mike was saying, there's been a transition in the workforce over the last several years, but particularly in the last two. Particularly with the Great Resignation, I haven't talked to any friends, colleagues, clients that haven't been impacted by this, specifically around people working remotely. A lot of organizations are struggling with the fact of whether or not they're trying to entice employees back. But the reality is people are getting more to the understanding that this is the way that we're moving forward in this new hybrid space where people are going to be coming into the office periodically, but there is going to be some form of home work environment. And then from a management perspective, having to understand what your workforce capabilities and skills are with having people dispersed through the organization and through whether they're working in an office or working at home. So today, what we want to talk about is how do your business processes and technology need to align to support your ability to manage those employees in those disseminated work environments, as well as being able to understand the skills gaps that are there and being able to help employees close that and have transparency across the board to allow people to do that.
That's great, John.
Yeah. So then in terms of, whether it's business process or technology that we're talking about, at the end of the day, from a management perspective, what we need to be able to do is be able to look at where the organization is from a strategic perspective. What do we need from our workforce? Being able to assess the skills of those employees in the workforce, to understand how that aligns to the business needs that we have. And then once you understand where those gaps are, be able to have real-time actionable information that you can do something about. So that's going to be really critical, is being able to have the data that you've collected on your workforce. And then once you identify those skill gaps, be able to do something about it.
I think when you're talking about that real-time information, that's a real critical component. When we look at the HR technology footprint, the world's evolved. When I started working in human resources technology, HR was still called personnel. People had record-keeping systems that kind of stemmed from the payroll environment out to the HR environment. A lot of the things around these towers, talent acquisition, development, rewards, was managed on desktop applications, disparate applications, a lot of point solutions around the organization. And over time, these evolved to become more advanced in the technology supporting them, and the ability to utilize things together. It's akin to working in your kitchen and you've got guests coming over and you making ceviche. In the old days, you would, have your fish and all your vegetables, and you'd have them in the fridge, and you'd be chopping everything with a knife and changing knives and, working through it. And it took a long time. And then you realized you had a food processor that could really help accelerate that process, get things mixed, get it in the fridge, get it ready for your guests on time, so your guests had a great experience. That's kind of where the HR technologies have gone. The areas we're talking about, talent acquisition, the recruiting, marketing, the actual going out and integrating with social media platforms so that you could get the best candidates in there, the actual recruiting process itself, integrating hiring managers, integrating the recruiter, the onboarding process, which is still, I think, one of the highest challenges that organizations have as you move that new hire in and trying to get them to all the various points in the organization to get them on board in the most seamless way that's pleasant actually for the new hire. And really important is that development once they get there. What are their goals? What is it that's going to make them successful at the company? what do they need to learn to develop? Talent development. These systems were all separate systems that people got access to. Meantime, the HR professionals, the people that work in the centers of excellence and the subject matter experts, were also working with other systems, the total reward systems, the comp, benefits, savings. And there was a core HR system at the base of it, but integrating it into all those systems was hard. And some were integrated, some weren't. So you had this very, disconnected environment that you were working in. Well, over time, that's changed, and we can really move into a more virtuous circle now. And John, if you could share the next slide, where core HR and analytics really enable this whole process and keep things connected and utilizing the up-to-date real-time information, so that when you look at this, instead of towers of work, and look at it in a business process model that creates this virtuous circle, you'll start with that blue box on the right, the blue circle on the right, the recruiting process, and utilizing the same information, it's connected into the onboarding process. And then the employee gets through that onboarding process and they're able to engage with you on what makes them successful and how to develop within the organization, and then access the tools in the learning environment that really let them do that, let them do that and continue to develop. In the meantime, you're going to be measuring performance and setting goals. And these cycles have decreased. They're where they used to be. Performance used to be an annual cycle. People got one rating. That was it. That's not how performance works today. Performance is a more iterative process that uses shorter time frames, involves more people in the organization, and it's something that, having the technology enable it really allows you to execute that model. And then you moved into rewarding people in comp and, of course, benefits and the like. And then you finish that cycle and get to the point where that you say, okay, we're in, at this point in the stage, we're looking at our workforce and doing workforce planning, and then building on that to say, where do we need additional skills? Where do we need additional people? So this is a goal, and the technology that we have today really enables it. So I think we have a poll question at this point, Kim. If those of you in the audience can just look at the poll, let us know, do you have one integrated HR technology environment for your organization today? Or, are there multiple systems that are, maybe disconnected and not serving you well?
Yeah, and while you guys are answering that question, one other component of this is, over the past 15 to 20 years, this virtuous circle has been, for the most part, been very much dominated by these enterprise resource planning packages, or ERPs. But we've made a transition over the last several years to more of a software as a service hosted environments, or SaaS environments. And one of the benefits of that is that there's inherent built-in APIs, native APIs within those applications, or third-party middleware applications that can connect multiple SaaS applications together. So in other words, what that means is that you're not necessarily tied to one specific software vendor to be able to meet your needs for any one of these specific business processes. So if you have very specific needs in a particular area, whether it's recruiting, workforce planning, compensation, you're able to connect multiple applications. So when we're talking about the HRIS landscape, we're talking holistically and collectively, the various applications that would fit into this landscape.
Interesting poll results in that, there's less than 20% that have all the functions on one platform, or all are fully integrated. So, that this represents the challenge, and let's talk some more about that. I think you can end the poll there, Kim.
Good. Huh? All right, so what's next? All right, so as Mike was saying about this new virtuous circle, for not new, but the virtuous circle in terms of the business processes, one of the first questions that we have to ask ourselves is understanding when you're looking at all of those various business processes is how do they all fit together? So we need to understand where one ends, the outputs of that business process, how they input into the next business process, and what will lead that next business process to have a successful outcome. So as Mike was talking about the example there from a talent management perspective, if you've identified some skill gaps, you have a choice of either inputting into a requisition that would, based on those skill gaps that you can go to recruit for, or you move into a development cycle with the employees that potentially have those skill gaps. You present them with the learning opportunities to be able to close those skill gaps. Once they close those skill gaps, then you have the ability to review the performance as a whole in that role. And then depending on how they're doing in that, from a performance management perspective, you can reward them from a compensation perspective. And then the cycle starts over again in terms of understanding, aligning your organizational objectives and your employees together to then understand what additional skills you may need to move forward. So as I was mentioning about having the right technology within that virtuous circle or HR life cycle, as you understand those business processes and understand the inputs and outputs of those and the roles which are within each one of those processes, what is the right technology for being able to support that business process? And then in terms of understanding desired outcomes or the success of those business processes, it's going to be different for different organizations, whether you're heavily manufacturing laden or whether you're a technology company. That's going to look different. But at the bottom line result of understanding success is going to be a function of, one, whether your managers feel that they have access to information at their fingertips. And then the second piece is whether your and that they have the skills or the tool sets once they identify where people are bumping up against the demands of the organization within the skills for those roles. Then it's a function of employees feeling that there's a transparent environment, that they understand what the organizational objectives are, what are the roles that are required to meet those organizational objectives, where do I stack up against, from a skill perspective, against those roles, and what's required to be able to meet those objectives, and do I have the tool sets out there that their organization has provided me for being able to close those gaps and to be able to upskill.
John, we got a question in on the chat that was, don't the various platforms need to be open architecture in order for the API connections to work? You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So most of the SaaS environments now, SaaS applications now, they come with native APIs. So to your point, those APIs need to be able to connect from one application to the other application. If they don't, that's where you can start building point-to-point integrations using various middleware that's out there. So we're doing that a lot right now. It's understanding what are the data sets that the consuming system need, and then building the integration specifically to that. I would say where we are right now, most of these applications do have some pretty open architecture for being able to move forward in building those integrations. There's still some out there that are a bit resistant, but even those, you're still able to connect them, even if you have to build a point-to-point integration.
So if you took a quick example, John, and said, I have an on-prem payroll that I need to connect to a SaaS application, or an on-prem HR system that I want to connect to a SaaS application. The SaaS application is an open architecture. It has APIs that you can utilize. The on-prem may not, and then you put the middleware in between. Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Yeah. So it's really just a function of doing an analysis of the consuming system, what are the data elements that it needs, mapping those to the elements of the sending system, And then you would have the middleware, which manages the consumption of the data from the sending system, and then can set up schedules and the timing and how often, or whether it's real time, whether it's a batch file that comes once a night, or whether it's a real time integration that it's constantly pinging when change pointers occur in the sending system, to be able to pick up those changes and to send them over to the middleware to the receiving system. So so it's really much more of a data mapping exercise and going through and understanding the process by which you want to send that data, whether it's real time or whether it's in a batch overnight.
And this is an area I know we've worked with clients a lot on, and it's really important. So thanks. So that was a great question. All right, moving on. So, how should you guys continuously measure results and adapt for success? Well, number one is you have to use the technology to get the accurate data. And you're in this disintermediated hybrid work environment. So when we say, the work environment being disintermediated, think about it as, from a manager's perspective, they used to be able to use the management by walking around. You interactions with people on a personal basis, on a random basis, that allowed them to gather the information to know whether programs were being effective, whether people were being effective, etc. So the technology today enables you to pull that data from the employee tools, from the usage of the tools. How are people engaging with the learning applications? How are people engaging with goals development applications? How are they engaging with the HR portal and employee self-service in general, so that you're able to see, well, the tools are working. We're able to apply survey metrics to that. We use tools such as Qualtrics to go out and measure continuously when we're at the employer, and then move that into an analytics model that gives the line manager as well as the senior executive team real-time information about it. And the result of that is you're able to have this very transparent organization. You identify the gaps. When we say across the board transparency, up and down the organization to all people. Develop action plans for resource needs and development, and then assessing that information so that you can do things in a timely basis. Like, I talk about cycle times being short, immediacy, demand-based learning, the opportunity to create for individuals and organizations, allowing for self-identified growth. And John, maybe talk a little bit more about connecting all the dots.
Yeah, so look, we are now in a position where in this disintermediated hybrid work environment, the only way that management can really make accurate decisions on a timely basis is by having information in front of them. And we're not talking about, the standard traditional list reports that typically get pumped out of the HR applications. We're really talking about analytics that can start showing trends of what's been happening, as well as the predictive nature of what they need to be looking at in terms of trend of the historical trends. So, if this has been probably one of the most substantive moves in the HR landscape over the last several years, is understanding what is the data that management or executives need to be able to make real-time decisions. And what's happening is, if they're not able to get that information from HR systems, is that they're going elsewhere to get it. And a lot of times it's finance. And I think that's not a good place to be, is where you're making a lot of your HR people decisions based on numbers. Right. And so what we want to be able to do is provide the right tools for executives to be able, and management to be able to have that real-time information to understand where we're headed, where we've been and where we're headed.
We've got a couple of minutes left, John. I want to move to the next slide. At the end of the day, we're going to go back to this virtual circle. Once you've done that business process work up front, and you've done the technical work, that you can connect all of this together. Then it's a process of continuous refinement so that you stay in that virtuous circle of always keeping things connected, always drawing the information out that's required, so that you don't get into a broken cycle that's really turns into a vicious cycle where you're chasing the data. I think, Kim, we're down to a minute or so.
So if there are any questions that you do have to ask directly to Mike or John, you can send them to them directly. Right on the screen, you're going to see their contact information. I think we should start wrapping things up. But before we do, I want to say thank you again to both of you, and to thank everyone for joining us for your time and attention. We hope that you'll join us for another of our upcoming webinars. You can visit GP Strategy's website to view any future sessions. And I want to wish everyone on the call today a very wonderful and productive rest of your day.
All right, Kim, before you close, I just want everybody to remember a couple of things. So, thank you very much. Number one, contact us if you'd like to talk some more. Key things to take away. Having the good technology that we can enable to integrating the technologies, establish the business processes, and continuously measure and get that information in people's hands through a strong analytics process. So we can't emphasize that enough. And please let us know any feedback and come see us. Okay, we're more than happy to talk to you some more. John?
Yep, and I'll work on my slideshow skills. Thank you guys very much. Really appreciate it.
Yep, and just before we end, I just want to remind everybody that we will be sending you a copy of today's presentation, as well as a link to the recording in case you wanted to share it with your colleagues. Again, thank you very much, Mike and John, and everybody else.
This webinar is brought to you by GP Strategies. Together we can create a world where business excellence makes possibilities achievable. You can access more webinars or download additional resources at gpstrategies.com/resource-library.